Hi, my name is Shannon Simons, and I am the author of Safe House and Finding Hope, and soon to be the author of 4 cozy romances that I hope to publish very shortly in a box set. So, I live in Seaside, Oregon, and this is the beach about a block away from my house, and I thought it would be fun to share with you one of my first books. A lot of my friends publish a chapter a day on their website, and I am so picky about my editing that I don't want to put a book out early. I might do it someday, but right now. So I thought it'd be fun to go back and read my first book to you, a chapter at a time. I've also had people tell me that Safe House is a book that they wish that their pastor or bishop or ministering sisters had read, or their family, so that they could understand them better. Had lots of calls from survivors, and so I thought at the end of each chapter we'd have a little conversation. So if you don't want to hear the conversation, just cut it off at the end of the chapter and wait for the next video. And gradually, over the weeks, we will read the whole book. Safe House is published by Cedar Fort. A portion of the proceeds go to Operation Underground Railroad. So I hope that if you do choose to get a copy, remember that and look up Operation Underground Railroad. They're a pretty spectacular nonprofit that works to end sex trafficking. So, Safe House by Shannon Simons, Chapter 1. September. Amber lay in her bed, monitoring the voices. They were raging, familiar background music in the night. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she knew her stepfather Burke and her mother Emily were in their bedroom, and her mother was in trouble. The voices rose and fell, one angry, growing louder, then lower, a menacing rumble. The other was soft, soothing, trying to make peace. The peacemaker was losing. Alert, Amber sat up. Even though she couldn't see Burke, she knew what was happening. He was large, drunk, spitting mad, spewing alcohol-soaked breath in his mother's face. Pushing back the covers, she quietly got out of bed. The voices grew intense. Her mother couldn't stop him when he got like this. Fear and anger mixed into a poison that ate her heart. No matter how many times this happened, she was still scared. Still angry with Burke and furious at herself for being a coward, gently she opened the door and slipped out into the hall. Standing between her younger brother's and sister's bedroom doors, she decided to look in on Bjorn first. Amber opened Bjorn's door and saw him in the shadows, standing in his crib. He let go with one little hand and reached through the bars for her, falling on his side, out of control. Whining in frustration, he tried to roll on his stomach to see her. Quickly, she crossed to the crib and picked him up, shushing him, frantically rocking and holding him. Silently, Amber went to Bjorn's open door and listened to the argument, making sure her parents were still in their room. Carrying Bjorn, she hastily crossed the hall and opened Greta's door. The hinges squeaked loudly. Amber held her breath, afraid to look down the hall. The argument had stopped. He had heard her. Sliding the door the rest of the way open, she ran into the room. Street light shone through the bedroom window, silhouetting Greta's small 7-year-old body. When she saw Amber, she ran to her big sister like a child to its mother. "Shh," Amber said as she pulled Greta toward the door. Amber froze. Her parents were coming. "Burke," her mother whispered urgently. "Burke, please, don't wake the children." "Shut it. It's my house. The little brat should hear this," he roared. "Greta." Bjorn started to cry. Amber looked down the hall and saw Burke lumbering towards them. Instinctively, she pushed Greta into the bedroom closet, depositing Bjorn in her skinny arms. There wasn't time to shut the closet door before her mother backed into the room, her hands on Burke's chest, trying to drive him, begging him to stop. "This is my house. Get out of the way," Burke growled, and shoved her mother. What happened next, all at once? It felt like time stood still. Happened all at once, and it felt like time stood still. Amber watched her mother's forehead hit the door jamb, sounding like a melon smashing in the wood. Falling hard, her mother's body lay still, arms limp at her side. Amber gasped loudly. Dark liquid ran down the white door jamb into the gray light. Burke's drunken body swayed around to see his wife's motionless form. Staggering backwards, he fell against Greta's pink bed. Greta's large eyes reflected moonlight from inside the dark closet. Before Burke could get up, Amber snatched Bjorn and took Greta by the hand and yanked her out of the closet. Carrying Bjorn and dragging Greta, she ran for the stairs. Amber didn't let the sound of Burke coming slow her down. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw she had a small lead. Burke growled, "Come back here, you." He swore and swayed from one side of the hall to the other. Pulling Greta with her free hand, Amber held Bjorn like a football as she took the stairs so fast Greta slipped. Bjorn's screaming covered up the foul names Burke shouted at her. On the ground floor, she pulled Greta to her feet and ran into the kitchen. Burke yelled as he made his way down the stairs. Letting go of Greta, she frantically dug into her mother's purse for her cell phone. While dialing 911, she ran for the door to the garage, Greta on her heels, clutching the back of Amber's nightgown. Pulling Greta into the garage, she locked the door behind them and turned on the light. "What's your emergency?" she heard the operator say. "Burke's hitting Mom again. My stepdad, my mom." Amber screamed into the phone as she looked for a place to hide. Burke was on the other side of the door, pounding, yelling. Miss, are you all right?" the operator asked. What a stupid question, Amber thought. Frustrated, she dropped the phone to free her hand. The phone shattered on the cement. She tried the car door. It was locked. Desperately, she tried the other car. Both cars were locked. The keys were in the kitchen with him. Bjorn wiggling, crying, in breathless, jagged screams. Greta stood halted, looking at the door to the kitchen, sure it would splinter, as it threatened to give way to his violence. Amber adjusted Bjorn on her hip. Suddenly, Burke stopped pounding on the door. And the only noise was Bjorn's cries. The silence frightened her more. Her mind raced. He must be going for the keys, she thought, or the garage door remote. Taking Greta by the hand, she pulled her along the back of the garage, past Burke's fridge full of beer, and headed for the other door, the one that led to the backyard. Amber had her hand on the doorknob and was turning it when it twisted hard in her hand. Terrified, she jerked back, and Burke threw the door open. As she turned to run, he grabbed a fistful of her hair. Bjorn screamed, slipped helplessly from her grasp, clawing at her nightgown, his chubby body falling hard onto the cement. Burke screamed, Bjorn screamed, slipping helplessly from her grasp, clawing at her nightgown, his chubby body falling hard on the cement floor. "Sorry." Burke yanked her around and leaned down and pulled her face close to his, blowing fetid breath into her eyes while Bjorn shrieked in terror at her feet. Burke began slowly lifting her by her hair. Struggling, she rose to her tiptoes, feeling her scalp pulling free from her skull. Clawing at his hands, she tried to get him to let go, her mind spinning, knowing no matter what she did, it would be like pouring oil on an inferno. She kicked him with her bare feet. Sirens sounded in the distance and broke through his rage. He dropped her, pulling his rough hands away with strands of long, dark hair between his fingers. Wild-eyed, he backed out of the door into the dark. Stumbling, he turned and ran erratically into the woods behind the house. Chapter 2, Finding Grace. In the shadowy night, a cool ocean breeze blew white curtains in the open bedroom window of a weathered Victorian house. The house was silent except for the ticking of a cuckoo clock and the rhythmic sounds of the ocean washing in and out as they came through the window. It was 1:30 in the morning when Grace's cell phone began ringing, shattering the silence at the James home. Eyes closed, Grace rolled toward the edge of her creaky old bed and reached for her cell phone. Her eyes opened when she realized she was falling in the darkness off the side of the bed. Reaching for anything, she took a hold of the charge cord, which pulled the cell phone from the table as she hit the hardwood floor. Rolling onto her back, she raised it to her ear. Answering, she said, "This is Grace," in her most professional tone. Sitting up against the nightstand, she knocked her water bottle onto the floor where it began to leak. Crap! Jumping, she took the robe from the end of the bed and wiped the floor. The voice on the phone said, "Grace, it's Gladys. I have a call for you." "Oh, hi, Gladys," she replied cheerfully and crawled back into bed. "Put them through." "Hello, Grace," said a well-known gravelly female voice. It made Grace smile. Mechanicum, she thought, where everyone knows everyone and everything. Life on the edge of nowhere in Oregon. Grace knew all the police dispatchers. This sexy voice belonged to a 60-year-old chain-smoking Roxanne, a dispatcher from the Mechanicum Police Department. "Hey, Roxanne." "Morning," Grace laughed, her easy laugh. "Well, sort of morning." Roxanne continued, "I have DSART officers out at 1239 Skyline Drive, requesting a response from DSAT. Grace supervised the DSAT team, which stood for Domestic Sexual Assault Team. It was her 8-year-old baby, The project paired domestic and sexual assault advocates with law enforcement to provide care for victims of violent crimes. The team responded to the scene of domestic or sexual assaults or met with victims at local hospitals. Let the officers know I'll be there in 10 minutes. That's the new housing development on the top of the hill. Ocean View, right? Grace wondered out loud. I think so, Roxanne answered. I'll call you if I get lost? Oh, don't I know it? Roxanne laughed and hung up. Grace said a prayer. It was a ritual, like a baseball player's lucky socks. When she ended her prayers, she phoned her mother, Mabel, who lived in a small apartment attached to the back of the house. Mom, gotta go, she whispered. Ugh, her mother groaned. I'm coming. It's only a domestic, she whispered. I should be back early. If not, will you drive Mary to the dentist? Sure, her mother mumbled. Grace dressed and padded downstairs wordlessly, passing her mother, who was coming up the stairs. Mabel went into Grace's room and crawled into Grace's bed to sleep. Grace turned on the light in the bathroom and caught a look at herself. She shook her head. Ouch, she said out loud. It's a good thing you're beautiful. Sarcasm was dripping from every word. Grace was in her 30s. Her hair was a long mess of unmanageable, streaky blonde ringlets that complemented her natural tan skin. Her eyes were an unusual shade of sky blue. People told her she looked young for her age, but she didn't believe them for a minute. Tired, she thought. She just looked tired. Perpetual dark circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Anyone that knew her said her face was an open book. Her mother said she was too thin, too curly, way too smart for her own good, and holy cow, was she clumsy. Grace tried to pick through the tangled ringlets and then caught them up in a hair tie. Realizing her attempts to tame her curls were a waste of time, she shrugged, turned off the light, and went to the living room. Checking the time, she noted it was only 5 minutes since the call. Grace had this routine down. She was already late. Soundlessly, she went to the front door, slipped her shoes on, and just as she was opening the door, she heard their old blind dog coming down the stairs to go out. No, lady, it's too early. Go back to bed, she whispered. The sound of the old Cocker Spaniel's nails on the hardwood floor was exaggerated in the quiet night. Slipping out the door, Grace pushed the dog back inside with her toe. The dog scratched on the door, begging to get out. Grace went down the front porch steps and headed for the car in the crisp autumn air. When she started her old red Jeep, the stereo blared. She punched the power button. Her long-legged 17-year-old brother Nephi had driven at last. Smiling, she adjusted the seat so she could reach the pedals. Grace turned the heat to full blast, but it didn't keep the cool night air from seeping through the Jeep's vinyl top. Goosebumps rose on her muscular arms as she drove off. So, in the first chapter, you get to meet Amber. And Amber is 17. She's a senior. And just like a lot of kids that are raised in homes with domestic violence, Amber has taken on the role of worrying about her younger siblings. The other person that you meet is her mother, even though you don't see her very much. And you might be judging her mother. What's she doing with this guy? He's drinking. He's a bad guy. He's doing bad things. But I would tell you, hang on. And look at the two things that her mother did do. Her mother tried to keep him from the children. She tried to keep him down the hall. Her mother is a survivor. You know, a lot of times we look at survivors. It's a small town. There's my neighbors, my cousins. 3 people I know have passed by while I'm reading. Survivors are strong. And we need to be careful of stereotyping them. Nobody comes with a tattoo on their forehead that says, hey, I'm an abuser. Don't pick me. We often fall in love with people and then find out much later what's happening. There are signs, there are things that you can look for, but most of us don't know them when we're picking out our husbands in our 20s. And I don't think Amber's mom is any different than a lot of us. She's doing the best she can with what she has. So hang on to your judgment, and watch Amber. She's tough. Grace is doing the job that I used to do, working with law enforcement. Probably the only factual things. The entire book is fiction. It's meant to answer a couple of questions for you. The first one is, why doesn't she just leave? And the second one is, why doesn't she hit back? And you should know the answers to those questions by the end of the story. Grace just only represents what I did. Probably the only factual parts in that little chapter is falling off the bed, which I did do one night, and then answered the phone like I wasn't laying on the floor in a pile of stuff. And her dog, Lady. We had a dog named Lady that always thought it was time to go because I was awake in the middle of the night. So not everybody has a Grace. Grace's job looks different in a lot of cities. In some cities, Grace is like I was. I worked for a nonprofit in Oregon. Now, not then, but now, advocates have privilege, and they can't be compelled to tell what survivors tell them. At the time that I wrote the book, that wasn't the case, and I did get certified later. And in some states, advocates work for the prosecutor's office, and sometimes they work for the police department, and sometimes they're social workers in the hospital. There's all kinds of people available to survivors. And if you're a survivor and you're looking for resources, I will put the number to the National Hotline in this post and in all posts, whether it's domestic or sexual assault. And believe me, they cross paths, sadly. And if you know someone who's a survivor, I hope that this story helps you understand them a little bit better, as well as keeps you up thinking. And it's just a really good read. Thanks for spending time with me.